Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I cannot tell you how pleased I am to see this many of you here. I was really worried the weather was going to affect us, and you know, election inspectors, you just go. So that's awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Aline is in the back. Wave, Aline. She is setting up the Badger books. I just want you to know this is not how the Badger books will be set up on election day. We won't have this many of them, for one thing. But the cords and stuff, we're going to work on how those can be. But I would like you to watch out for the cords when you go back there to try them out. And then also, when you go back there to give it a try, sit at a chair. We're going to have them tipped up a little bit, but we can't tip them up very far to give you a better view as an election inspector. And so decide whether you might need a chair cushion, you know, to bring with you to raise yourself up a little bit. Those of us, or those of you who are a little, you know, height challenged. I don't want to say anything. So you'll kind of want to watch for that. Okay, so I'd like to see, we have several new election inspectors, and I want to see how many of you are here. And I'm sorry, can you stand if you are? Deb Benson. There you go. She's back there waving. Good. Yay. Ann Brophy and Deanne Steele. There you go. Hi, guys. Sue Curtis. Are you here? Awesome. Hi, Sue. Charles and Mary Edwards are right up here in the front. Liz Sorge. There you go. Oh, good. Welcome. Yay. We're glad to have you. Yes. Give them a round of applause. Yes. All right. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Does everybody have a packet? Is everyone signed in? And I do need to know if you want to be paid for today or not paid for today, so please check that box before you leave. If you have to leave early for any reason, just make sure you sign out, because you're going to be paid for this time if you choose to be paid. You'll be paid for this time. I want to make it accurate. Okay, housekeeping, you saw where the coats go, restrooms are there. There's not a soda machine anymore, but I hope you all brought something if you wanted to drink it. These hours count toward the 3-hour requirement. You have a 3-hour training requirement for a 2-year election cycle. So we're going to be here for 3 hours today, and you'll be set for the next 2 years. I need schedule letter responses by tomorrow. If you brought yours, there's a box out there to drop it. I've heard from lots of people, and I appreciate that. So just drop it off there in that box. So we'll get started. The good news, salary increase. Yes, $10 an hour now. So yeah, I was like, we need to pay people more. So that's what we decided. Chiefs will get a little more, but the mayor was gracious enough to agree that that was a good idea. So there you guys are. So thank you for the mayor and the council for approving that. But you guys deserve it. I wish we could do more, but you know, we're small. So we got a tight budget. The other good news, we're going to use Badger books. Yay, as I said, and I think you're going to like them. I think once you get going on them, you're going to be very comfortable. Again, watch for the cords, and then see if you need a chair cushion. It's not a problem if you do. We have 2 new positions, and if you look at your packet on page 3, we start with, we decided, because of the change with Badger books, we're going to need a greeter. And I also, because of Badger books, we have 2 people at each station, and we have 2 chiefs, and we have 2 of everything. And I need to have an odd number of workers, as you know, that's the law. And so a greeter will make us odd, and we know we're already odd, but this will make the number odd. So a greeter will not be toward that count, so that helps us. So a greeter is going to have an important position, though, because they need to direct people as they come in. A greeter will need to kind of say, you know, hey, great to see you here. The sample ballot will be by the greeter. They will tell voters that come in, go to any station, because no one has to wait in line anymore at an alpha line. They can go to any poll book station. If they need to register, the greeter will tell them, go to that registration table. We'll have one of the Badger books separated for registrations because, as you know, that is the longest process. And while we try to get people to register ahead of time, many people wait until Election Day. It takes a while. It takes a while no matter what. Badger books is not going to take longer than paper registration forms. The only problem we have is that we can't have them in a separate room like we used to. So we're going to try to have them by themselves, but they have to be in the same room because of the server. The server needs to be able to communicate with all of us. So that's one of the changes. The other will be the inspector who's going to be posted by the DS200 voter machine. And we need a catchier name for that position. But this person is going to rotate in and out. If you look at page 4, this person will rotate in and out with working at the poll books. They'll be counted into the count. This person needs to be near the DS200, but not crowding it. We've had complaints in the past, and it's not anybody trying to do anything. It's just that voters felt a little intimidated by that person standing so close to them. So, yeah, I know. And not like anybody would. But you need to be there to make sure that the screen comes up that says, thank you for voting, so that we know their vote counted correctly, and then they can go. And if a ballot is rejected, please do not pull it out of the machine. Let the voter read the screen that tells them what they did wrong on their ballot, and let them see it. And let them pull out the ballot, or you can pull it out for them, but don't pull it out immediately. You shouldn't be, if you can avoid it, you shouldn't be handling their ballot or looking at how they voted unless they say, can I help you? You know, you can offer, can I help you figure out what's wrong? If the voter can't figure it out based on the message on the screen and looking at their own ballot, if they still just don't see their error, then you step in and say, can I help you figure out what's wrong? We will not have to notate second and third ballot in the poll book anymore. So what we're going to do, I mean, I guess there's the capability of doing that, but we would prefer, we're going to have a log at the DS200 vote tabulator where you would just write a name, check the box, second ballot or third ballot, and we're going to keep that, and that record will be part of the inspector statement for the day. It's going to be a little easier process than having to go back to poll books, look them up again, figure, do a notation, et cetera. It's going to be a lot easier. And if they do need a third ballot, you're going to need to direct them to the express vote. The express vote will not let them make a mistake like voting in 2 offices. So that's kind of what this position's going to be doing, is kind of making sure that the voter's ballot is valid and gets voted. So the I voted stickers will be there. You know my opinion of them. But I would say do not hand them to everybody. Just make them available. And if they ask for one, of course give them one. And they'll be on the machine. But I would like you to offer them to the kids. We've got the future voter stickers, and those are awesome. But the adults can choose whether they want one or not. We have them, you can offer it, but don't offer it to everyone, don't give it to everyone. Just say, we have stickers if you want one. Because we are finding them in the parking lot, on the floor, and yeah. So, and they don't, and also remember not to stick them on any of your stuff, because they stick like glue. So, so there's that. So we do have one sort of a bad news part, is that we did have to add active shooter information to our contingency plan. Now the media does extensive reporting on these incidents, which they should do. But it does give you the feeling that this is happening every minute. And really the incidence is low. And the rooms, I mean, just be aware is what we want to do. We don't want anybody to get scared and think it's going to happen, but just be aware. And we are making everyone aware so that you know what your options are. So it's kind of a bummer, but that's our world today, and I'm sad to say that. And then to move on from that, in the news, so we had the good news and the bad news, and now we have in the news. In the news is the infamous movers situation. You may have heard about it, where voters are going to be taken off the poll list and they can't vote, and oh my God. So what happened with that is the voter may have done something official, like register a vehicle with a DMV or some other government-related issue that they did that triggered that their address may not have matched what was in their voter record, and these agencies are now connected to each other, and we are also connected to several states. There's a group that are part of this ERIC system, and ERIC is, I believe, Electors Election Registration Information Consortium. So that's to keep the point of it is to keep everybody's poll list accurate and up to date, but they are pulling information maybe a little too zealously, and it may not be correct. So in Badger books, yay, people will be marked. There won't be a separate list that you have to look at. They will be marked as a mover, and you can ask them. There's directions right here, poll worker instructions. The only difference is we're not looking at a poll book. But if you just look at that, and it tells you what to do. If the voter says, I'm definitely registered still in Monona at that address, then just have them go, do the check-in, we're all good. But if they say no, then they need to change their address, kind of re-register, maybe they're at the wrong place. The issue is that they'll have to have proof of residence, and that may impact somebody, but they do have time to go get it. They can show you something on their phone. There's various ways that they can get that proof of residence to you. You can call City Hall and ask us, do we have a water bill for this person? We will check, we will help that voter vote. So we want to do our best. We don't want to turn anyone away that should be voting. But this is what's happened, and that's why it happened, and it's not any kind of plot to get rid of voters. It's that this consortium works together, and sometimes it doesn't work correctly. So, or as good as we wish it would. But it also, people had 30 days to respond, and they chose not to. That happens. They get a mailing. That happens to me all the time with voters, and I'm sorry to say, I will mail them letters. That's why I'm always hounding you guys to get everything as accurately as you can on Election Day, because people do not respond. I have to contact them again, send them a letter, and ask, please, please, and call them on the phone and send them emails, and they do not respond. So all I'm trying to do is get, do we have your address right? So just letting you know. But it did also do a good thing, is that it got people to check their registrations on My Vote Wisconsin. And I had a call the other day that somebody couldn't find their son when they looked him up on My Vote Wisconsin, as though he wasn't registered. And he says, I know he's registered. So I looked him up, and it turned out we had his birth date wrong. And when you look on My Vote, you have to have your birth date in order to look yourself up. And we had the birth date wrong, and I looked at his original voter registration form, and it was way back in the days when it had the hash marks between the birth dates, and the hash mark got confused for a 1, and we just had his birth date wrong. He was totally registered, everything is cool, I fixed the record. It took 5 seconds, literally 5 seconds to change the record, correct the record. That's what it helped. We had an error, we're human, we fixed it. It was great. So I thought, well, that was a useful thing, this is good. And then we've had voters that have written down their birth date wrong. That's happened too, and I'd like to fudge mine, but I can't. I thought it was a good idea. So that's that. Now we're going to remind you of some things that are always the case. So we're going to start with sort of the basics. And photo ID, now it's called voter ID. They change the name all the time. I don't have a page for that because you know what it is required. We do have to show it, and all you're going to do is look at it, see if it reasonably resembles the voter, and it may not, but that's okay as long as it's, within the expiration time period and has the signature reasonably, the name reasonably conforms. So, Bill can be William and vice versa, that type of thing. There are 4 elections this year. February 18th, yes, there is a spring primary. Unfortunately, it's the one-issue ballot. And it's the Justice of the Supreme Court. But we're going to have a full crew on because we want you all to learn Badger books. So it's an awesome training opportunity. I don't know what our turnout will be, probably low. But it's a great opportunity for us to try Badger books. Then April 7th, the spring election, we have local offices. We have 4 candidates for the 3 alderperson seats. That's exciting. You all have a choice. Municipal judge. We don't have a choice, but he's good. And school board will have, there will be, I don't believe there's a primary for school board, so it's school board, yeah, there's not a primary, yep. So school board seats will be there, and then, of course, the presidential preference primary. It's going to be big. So April is going to be a big one. What we'll probably do is have extra workers to do the absentee processing, but otherwise we'll still have the same number of workers at the Badger books. We'll have the greeter, we'll have the DS200 person. Might have a couple extra people just to be sort of able to relieve people and take a turn. So, but that's not going to be as big a course as the big one. Then August 11th is the partisan primary. There might be a lower turnout, we're not sure, but that's the one people hate because they can only vote in one party and they don't like that. And then, of course, November 3rd is the general election, which is the president, and we're all going to be on deck, and that's going to be big. It's funny to me that even though, it's awesome and funny, I guess, is that even though nationally there seems to be such contention, well, there is, it's not just seeming, there's contention, but when you get to the polling place, people are just excited. And your attitude is going to make a big difference too. If you guys are all like, hey, this is glad you're here to vote. It really, people on the ground are not that angry about, they know that now is their opportunity to make their voice heard. So most of the time it's pretty exciting. I've not really had a big negative effect of a presidential election. I come in and the energy in the rooms, there's like, woo, like we're all, this is awesome. So, this is when we get to be citizens. This is the big thing. And all elections are that, but this is the one that people, of course, pay the most attention to. So, and you guys are a big part of how that gets pulled off with people, trust me. We don't have any Republican Party appointed election inspectors this time. Sometimes we do, but we did not, so that's fine. And then I just need to remind you all to maintain a nonpartisan space. When people come in to vote, we don't want anything that will cause a voter to think a certain way, feel that they're in a hostile environment in any way, and et cetera. So, no political discussion, and I mean none, especially in November, but all the time. Don't discuss anything. Even if it's not on the ballot, do not talk about political things. Talk about the weather, talk about, what you're doing Saturday night, that type of thing, but just don't talk about political issues. And so no newspapers, except the puzzle or the funny pages, unless there's political information or articles in it. No all red or all blue outfits, sorry to be like that, but I had somebody ask last time, well, I wear blue at work, and I'm like, just bring a shirt. change into something else. Just don't do the whole political color. We just don't want anyone to think that we already we're trying to influence them. And then I'd like you to keep eating and drinking at work to a minimum. So at the tables, please don't eat or drink too much. Like water, make sure it's out of knockable range because, we've had things spill and it ruins materials and could ruin records that we need to keep forever. So we have your coffee stain in the archives. So there you go. We might have election observers in April. We will definitely have them in November. So just be ready and be courteous to them, but they cannot touch anything and they can't intimidate you. And we will have an area set off, marked off so that they don't get too close to you, but they are allowed to be there. And unless a voter asks them for assistance in some way, they really shouldn't be interacting with voters. So you're used to them. They have an agenda, but they're trying to help their cause, and so they have the right to do that. We're in America. So inspectors at St. Stephen's in particular, I just want to thank you for your efforts to keep that area clean and nice. We're a rent-free tenant of that space, and we need to make sure that we're good stewards and leave it in good condition. And you have been, so I appreciate it. We've had a couple issues in the past, or I got hollered at, but whatever, I can take it. So, does anyone have any questions about just what we've talked about, reminding about basics, kind of? No? Okay. All right. The election day process is going to change somewhat. We're going to work on it. This is a work in progress with the Badger books, so I welcome your input if you have ideas after February, after April. If you say, we really should have this table a little farther apart, or something, let me know. Let Eileen know, and we'll try to see if we can make it better. We need to, we're working on it, and we're open for suggestion. Take direction and ask questions of chief inspectors. They will assign you a workstation. So please pay attention to your chief inspectors. That's who you go to when you need help for anything. Any unusual thing happens. We ask that each team, because you're going to be working together on the Badger books, that you switch off to be the ones doing the data entry. We want everyone to be proficient and everyone to be comfortable and confident using the Badger books. So please work together, take turns. Try it out yourself. There's going to be a super user and 2 chief inspectors who have been especially trained, additional training. If you have issues or questions, you go to them and say, this isn't working right or whatever. They'll help you. So you're not on your own. But take turns, try it out. You're going to have a ward stamp and ballots at your station to hand out. We're going to have the ballots handed out right at the poll books. It's going to streamline our process and also help with our traffic, where voters won't have to cross all kinds of lines to get a ballot once they've signed in. You both need to initial the ballots, but don't do too many in advance. Just do a few and then hand them to the voter. Voter numbers will be printed out, but we're not going to give them to the voter because they don't need it. You're going to hand them the ballot, and the voter numbers will get collected now and again during the day by the greeter. So we're going to let them print. And, you can stick them under something or just if they get too many, pull them off. But don't take them apart and just tell the greeter you need them to come and get some numbers. And it'll be easier that way too. So we're not going to have separate numbers to have to deal with. Even with the Badger book use, we do need to have the poll book certification page signed. That's on page 7. It needs to be signed by an odd number of poll workers, and including one chief, which includes one chief. So 2 of you are randomly going to be selected at each shift to sign, because we only need 1 copy of it, because we're not going to have all separate books. So there'll be 1 copy of that certification page you'll be asked to sign. The chiefs will have it, and then the chief will sign it. They'll have a couple from the afternoon sign it. We have to turn that into the county. Let's see. Good news with the Badger books. More good news. It's all good news. No comparing poll books during the day or at the end of the night. That's kind of nice. Yeah. And again, voters can go to any line to check in, which I think they're going to like, and voters will also get a ballot right away, like I said. It's going to, I think this process is going to be so streamlined, it's going to be really nice. The voting process, I'm going to just go through step by step what happens when a voter comes in to the polling place. So a voter comes in, a greeter lets them know if they are registered, they can go to any Badger Book station. If they need to register, they go to the Badger Book station set aside for that. The voter states their name and address out loud to the election inspectors, just like now. Inspectors find the voter's name in the Badger Book and verify the address matches. And if they're at the wrong polling place, inspectors direct them to the correct location. If their address or name does not match the poll book, the inspectors can handle that right at the Badger Book. So you're also going to be doing not voter registrations, but you will be updating addresses. If a brand new voter comes in, that's where we send them to voter registration. But if somebody changed their name and they still live at the same place, you can do it right at the Badger Book. And when you get the Badger Book training and back, when you get to try one, you'll see that there's a place to check, a box to check, name change, address change. It's going to be good.
You mean address
Correction, yes. Not change. Address correction. So if somebody moved, we could send them to the registration table, but we could also, if there's 7 people in the registration line, we could do it right where we are. You can do it. You can do it. Okay. They do need to have proof of residence, of course, if they change their address. If you make a minor correction, there is a notes section on a voter after they leave. If you can check on that in Badger Books, and it will say, just add an A to, middle initial is A, not T, or something like that. So if we made a mistake, which we do. And more good news. No more supplemental poll lists. No more late registration lists. So if somebody's new, you're not going to have to write them in the back and give them a number, and you're not going to have to be looking for late registrations. They will be incorporated within the list. Yes. So, inspectors will follow the Badger Book instructions. It tells you on the screen to look at the voter ID, collaborate with each other if necessary. Remember that the voter ID does not have to have the voter's current address, and it will say that on the screen. It will remind you of it. But it must be unexpired or expired within 2 years of the last general election, which was November 6th of 2018. So that will be on the screen. Badger Books tells you these things, which is why I didn't give you a lot of detail on how to do these processes, because the screens show it to you. Let's see, where was I? And the name must reasonably conform. Bob can be Robert. Photograph reasonably resemble. And it needs to be unexpired or expired within those specifications that I gave you, November 6, 2018. Anything expired prior to that is too old. If they don't provide or don't have proof of ID, they may vote a provisional ballot. You can contact a chief inspector. So if they don't have a photo ID, they can vote provisionally and have time. They'll have until Friday, 4 o'clock after the election to provide that at City Hall. When the check-in's complete, turn the Badger Book screen to the voter, and Aline will emphasize to kind of grab the sides rather than the corners so that you don't hit any on-off buttons. You turn the screen, the voter signs with their finger, and you just need to then turn it back around to you. They won't be very legible because they're using their finger. We're going to consider stylus as maybe, but right now it's going to be fingers. Watch, though, that somebody doesn't sign it Mickey Mouse or some other name or phrase like, I hate this, or draw a picture, which we've had, and a guy drew a fish. That's not a name. So their ballot won't be issued. You cannot issue that ballot until they sign. And they can do an X, which I think is really ironic when you think they can't write Mickey Mouse, but they can make an X. But the reason for that is Mickey Mouse is a name. It's not their name. So, unless their name is Mickey Mouse, and then I'd say their parents hated them. So that's kind of weird to me. Okay, if the voter's unable to sign due to disability, there's an option for that. If the voter has an assistant, there's a place for that, all on Badger Books. You're gonna love it. You press finish, and the voter number prints out, but as I said, don't tear it off. We have the printers in the stem of the Badger Book, so they're right there, and changing the paper will be required throughout the day, but it's really simple. You drop the roll of paper in, just drop it in. There's no trying to fit it and click it and do stuff. It just drop it in, easy, easy. So just allow the numbers to wrap around, don't separate them. And there will be gaps in the voter number sequence because absentees, when they're processed, don't get a voter number. So there's going to be gaps because of absentees. So we're not going to have a stack of complete numbers for the day, but we will have numbers that are part of the archive for an election. And as I said, inspectors will have ballots at their station. They need the word stamp, and then both will initial them, and they'll hand a voter a ballot right then, which I think is great. I think it's going to be super helpful. So if a voter needs to register, I want you to go to pages 8 and 9, and just so that you can see how extensively their voter registration form changed. I guess clerks have complained about it a little bit because the guy that designed it was sort of ducking when he came to training. But if you look at it, it does sort of follow a little clearer than the previous one, but that is the change. So you may see these, people may bring them in, and there you go. They should go to the Badger Book station designated for registrations, and they have to register and vote at the same station. So the voter registration station will have ballots also, and we'll be handing them out to the voters when they register. If you're doing registrations, be sure you ask for proof of residence, not ID. You want their proof of residence. The newish items, these are newish. If you go to page 10, I spent a lot of time harping at past trainings about what wasn't acceptable, and everything I said that wasn't acceptable now is, so you see how good I am. So bank statement by a credit union is fine, which was before, but now a mortgage statement issued by a bank or credit union is good to go. Home equity credit line statement issued by a bank or credit union. Credit card statement is now acceptable. I cannot believe that one. And that includes like a Kohl's charge card. It can't be the card, it's got to be the statement. And it can't be an offer, it has to be the statement. So if you have a Menards account, you bring in your Menards statement. Yes. Yes, they can be online on their phone. Everything can be acceptable online on their phone. Because I know a lot of people now don't do anything on paper. I don't know if I'll ever get to that point in my life, but right now, no, I like paper. Retail store. But remember, the proof of residence is only these things on this list. Nowhere on this list does it say insurance bills of any kind. I don't want a State Farm insurance bill taken. No, no. Medical bills, no, not even if they're from the UW, which you would think is a government entity, but not really. That doesn't count. W-2 forms are not acceptable, which surprises me, but it's true. So these are the things do not take. Only the things that show on the Badger book, because the list will come up on the Badger book and say, is it one of these things? It can't, don't pretend it's one of those things, because it's not. If it's a insurance bill or medical bill or W-2, no, don't take it. So just stick with the list. Badger Care is from a government agency, yes. That's like Social Security would be, or, So if a person does not have a valid proof of residence, they cannot register to vote. This is not a provisional ballot situation. This is you don't get to register. So they've got to go get it. They've got to get it up on their phone where you can see it. It is not your job to bring it up, for them. You have to be able to see it. They need to be able to prove, and if they really, really, argue about it, again, call us at City Hall. We'll see if they have a water bill. We'll try to help as best we can, but they need to prove to you that they live at that address. So that item has to have their name, and if it's a couple, it has to have both of their names, or one or the other, and then the person has to have something else that has their name and address on it. So make sure that you are diligent about that, because again, trying to get it later is virtually impossible. And then we have an incorrect voter registration, and we will be inactivating that voter registration, and then they'll come back and vote next year and really be upset that they aren't registered. I voted last time. It creates a lot of issues. So just make sure you're careful on that. If a person has a driver's license but is unwilling or unable to provide it, they can register if they have something else for proof of residence, but they would get a provisional ballot. So provisional ballot is really only issued anymore for somebody who does not provide their driver's license. Okay, for whatever reason, they choose not to, they don't have it on them or whatever. Or a Wisconsin ID, yes, good point, or a Wisconsin ID card. Or a passport. We're talking about all the options. I'm saying if they don't show you one of those things with their picture on it, they can't register, they can't vote. They can register if they have proof of residence, but if they don't have a photo ID, they cannot vote. So yes, there's many options for photo ID documents, but if they don't have one of them, no. And this in particular is not just for photo ID. This is if they will not provide it. If you have a driver's license by law, or a Wisconsin ID counts for that too, you have to provide that number. If you will not provide that number, you can vote provisionally until you do provide it. That's the point here. So we were really not talking about photo ID, we were talking about providing your driver's license. It's the law. You have to. If you have it, you have to provide it. If you will not provide it or cannot provide it, you can vote provisionally, but you're going to have to provide it before your vote can count. Does that make sense? Are we clear? Because photo ID, voter ID is different than what I'm talking about. Okay? Okay, On pages 11 and 12, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but if you look at pages 11 and 12, this is the voter process that we have always used when we didn't have Badger books. And if Badger books for some reason goes inoperable, we would revert to this. We would revert back to what we used to do. We're going to have, and I'm hoping not forever, but we're going to have 2 sets of poll books printed and ready to use if we have to use them. So you will revert back, the 2 of you at the Badger Book Station will do what you've always done. A voter comes up to you, you look them up in the book, you both write them down, they get a voter number. We'll have voter numbers also, paper voter numbers. We'll have 5 minutes, I understand, to figure out where the last voter number used was. But I figure we can just use voter number slips with, it's obvious that it's not a Badger book number. And we'll make that work. But that is for you to review, that tells you how this has to work if Badger Books goes down. And I've talked to many clerks that have used Badger Books, and I want to tell you that the use went from, what did I say last time? Was it 9, I think, were used? Was it 9 last year, Aline? 13? 13 were used last year, and 76 are being used this year. It's really popular, very popular, and works really well. So we're hoping we won't have to use this contingency plan, but that's what we're going to have to do should the Badger books say, I'm done, I don't want to work here anymore. So, okay. So, yes, ma'am. Badger books are Aline's going to go through that when she trains, but I will tell you that, anything can be hacked, but they do everything they can to not allow that to happen. And the actual Badger books like here, that data is not connected to anything except each other. There's no way, it's not connected to the internet at all. It never will be until we have it back in our office and upload data. But that's still by an encrypted, oh my gosh, password. We have super secret triple password thing, oh my goodness, on validations. And it's very secure. Then as they are confident, the state, when I say they, I mean WEC, is very confident in their processes, but of course there are ways, but we're going through a lot of additional security measures now, clerks are, throughout the state, to make sure that even not Badger books, but our regular election data is kept so secure. So, but Aline will give you more information. Was there a question in the back? Yes, if somebody brings in a completed voter registration form, it would have to go to the voter registration table, and that person there will re-enter all of that information into Badger books and we can keep their paperwork, yes. We would keep their paperwork separate, off to the side. It would become part of the record. I have extensive archives. Yes?
Will the Badger book have names and addresses for both polling places, even though?
Yes. Yes. In fact, Badger books has every voter in the state is in it. Our data is at the top, and then that way, if you look somebody up, they will be, if they are a voter in Wisconsin, their record comes up, so that we can know that they are not in the right polling place, or they are like a Madison voter. We get Madison voters every year. This way, hopefully, we're not going to get that. That's not going to happen to us because Badger books won't allow it. And that's how we know somebody is registered someplace else, and then we can get them registered here if they need to be. And you have a question back there?
I expect there are going to be voters that are going to ask about packages.
Yep. Yes, and Aline will go over that, and I will tell you what it is here in a little bit for a response to voters that are unhappy or unsure or are concerned. And again, your attitude is going to make a lot of difference. You need to be positive. You know, I think you will be positive once you start working with it, but I think you also need to be confident and positive that, oh yeah, this is how we do it now. This is really fun. You know, it's different. We're doing what the nation is going toward, electronic means of doing just about everything. So we're just kind of updating our process to something a little more modern. So, yes?
Badger books be used to help the state.
As I said, there were 13 users last year throughout the state, and now there's going to be 76. So it's grown. The use has grown. And so, did anybody else have any questions? I should move on. No? Okay. Good? All right. We're good. Yep. Let's see, where was? Okay. I just wanted to reiterate over and over, if a person does not have a valid proof of residence, they cannot register. So they can't register. If a person, okay, I talked about that. Badger, okay, I lost my place, sorry. And I just, as I said to you, I'm right where I need to be here. Election inspector positivity is very important, as I just said. And if a voter refuses any use of electronics, if a voter is not going to do it, even after they've been assured that the Badger books are not connected to the internet and are very secure, you tell them, this is the way we do it now on election day. In the future, you may request an absentee ballot to be mailed to you, or you may vote at City Hall during the in-person absentee period. Neither of those options uses Badger Book. So if they want to avoid Badger Book, they do have the option to avoid it. And in the same way, it's a different subject, but we did have one voter complain about voting at a church. Felt that church and state separation was important, which it is. Again, you can offer the absentee voting option. And it won't be on election day, of course. If they want to vote on that election, they'll have to vote at the polling place, but for future, they can vote absentee if they find that offensive. There's options. So I guess we did get through the questions, and so it's time for Aline. And Aline is going to go through the Badger Book materials, and that starts on page 13. And she's going to give you an overview, and we'll be all set.
So I know last year we did go through quite a bit of this, but since we haven't seen it in a year, review is good. So the expectations for Badger Book. The tasks done on the Badger Book are all related to the voter number. So we're going to check in voters. You can do curbside. You're not going to actually take the machines out, but there's an option on there. Confidential voters, we don't currently have any in Monona, but if we do, we can do it that way. If they're unable to sign, like Joan mentioned, there's something that we can select, and we can record assister information. Election day registrations are also done on there. We process absentee ballots that way as well. What is not done on there is the ineligible voter list. So that is generally kept with the EDR station, and that generally has the felons on it. Any paper districting materials, we have the address range list. Inspector statement, provisional ballots, and challenged ballots. Spoiled ballots, if you accidentally process an absentee ballot using the wrong name, this is where you'll get your chief inspector as well. Or if you process somebody and have them sign under the wrong name in the poll book, there's no way to take those back out. So a chief inspector would need to log this, and we would go from there. In-person absentee voting at City Hall, they will not be using these, and special voting deputies will also not be using them. So just a quick overview on how we are processing absentee ballots. The election inspector, which will be designated by your chief, will go through the process of stating the voter name and address. So that's the same as it always has been. Allowed, verifying the envelope information. Then they will go to the Badger book with the max of 10 envelopes with the ballots, check those in, and then they will go to the tabulator and put those ballots through, and then return to the chief table for more ballots. So here is some of the security information. Can Badger books be hacked? Yes, like any computer system, they can. Wisconsin Elections Commission has done everything they possibly can to make this as less likely as they can. And the risks are comparable to the paper poll books. So if somebody were to pick up that computer and take it with them, if they could get logged in, which there's 2 sets of logins before they could get any information, they're gonna get the voter's name and address. So that's the same thing if they picked up the paper poll book and ran out of the room with it. You're getting voter names and addresses, which those are already public record, so you can get them anyways. We don't want them to do that. Those are expensive compared to the paper poll books, but they're not getting much if they do get it and can get into it. So the Wisconsin Elections Commission takes a layered defense. The data is encrypted and retrieved from the state voters system, and that is done on a USB drive. So these machines will never be connected to the internet. The only way they're getting information and us getting information off of them is through a USB drive. They are not connected to any network outside of this polling location. When we go back there to do some examples and practice, you'll see that there's a router that is secured, and only those Badger books talk to each other through it. Again, only the voter's name and address are included on the poll book unless they're registering to vote, and then it has more information until we pull it off of it. So personally identifiable information. So only the data necessary to run the election is included on there. So no birthdays, driver's license, except what we pull on the election day registrations. So, just like Joan said, if a voter refuses to sign electronically, according to state statute, they cannot have a ballot. They can do an X if they're not really able to sign. If they're skeptical of the barcode scanner, which we're only going to be using for election day registrations, it's only pulling their name, date of birth, driver's license number, and expiration date, and that's just to speed up data entry, so you're not having to type it. It's not storing any other information from your license. If they're refusing use of electronics, as Joan had said, this is how we do it now on election day. In the future, you can request an absentee ballot or vote in person. Neither of those, the voter would need to deal with the Badger book. It still eventually does get processed using the Badger book, though. Does anyone have any questions about the security? Yeah. So the question was, are we going to have handouts just about security concerns or posted on the wall? That is a good idea and good point. I don't know if we're going to have handouts, but we can add that to our, hopefully, to-do list. Each station will have a small binder, so hopefully at least we can add it to that as reminders for you guys so that you'll know what to say when questions come up. And if there's a problem, always get your chief. Yes, and the huge thing is not waiting in line either. So the greeter can mention, go to any poll book, it's a new system this year, and the greeter is especially going to be important in having a positive attitude because they're going to be the first person that every single voter sees when they come in to vote. Any other questions? Yeah. So publicizing, we'll put it on the city website and WVMO.
There's probably an article.
You can have your notes with you. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. They cannot vote. They have to sign. So in the future, they have other options, but if they want to vote in this particular election, they do have to sign. I have my slides out of order, but that's okay. So pointers from other Badger Book users. Some of their big takeaways were do not pound on the screen. I know it sounds silly. Sometimes there's a slight lag. So you're going to push something and it's not going to react the way you want it to. Just give it a second. Don't pound on them. Hesitate. Count to 5. When the voter is signing, if they're having a problem, it's probably because their palm is on the screen and it's trying to register their finger and their palm. It's not going to let them do that. So if they're having a problem, have them lift their hand up and just use their finger. So I have don't touch the upper right-hand corner, but they actually changed it with this latest update. There's no longer an X in the top right corner, so you can't exit out of the program, so that's great. When you're turning it, don't hit the bottom right-hand corner. That's the power button. It will shut off the machine. You'll have to turn it back on, log back in, and start over with that current voter. If you haven't hit finish voter, they are not checked in. When you are searching for someone, only start with 2 or 3 letters of the last name. If you type really fast, it will get bogged down and it'll take a minute to catch up. If they are registered, 2 or 3 letters, unless they have like Johnson for the last name where there's a lot of voters, it will bring them up. They'll be on the top. It'll bring them up pretty quick. If after 2 or 3 letters you spell out their whole name, you still can't find them, they're insisting that they're registered, the only way to rectify this is to either have them re-register or call Joan or I. We can look in the system and see why they aren't in there. But if they're not in there, they're not registered to vote. Be a team, but be sensitive of information. So don't read driver's license numbers out loud, dates of birth, bank account information. We have server machine and then just normal client machines. The server machine is going to have the yellow sticker on it. This is the most important one not to turn off. This is the one that's the brains and it's in charge of all the other machines. If that one does get shut off, none of the other machines will be able to process voters until that one comes back on and is logged in. It does back up every 5 minutes. The client does receive all the information from the server. So that's the yellow one, super important not to turn that one off. Are they connected to the internet? They are not connected to the internet. They're wirelessly connected together with the router that is not an open network. Does it matter where the router is placed? It does. It has to be in the same room, but it needs to be out of the reach of public. So we'll probably, my guess would be have it at the chief's table. We haven't figured this out exactly yet because we haven't used them. Is the voter count updating in real time? Yes. Sometimes you might not be able to see the next voter number that's going to come up until it prints. So it can pull from that server machine and see what number it's on. What happens to the information after election day? We put it on a USB drive and then we import it into WizVote. And the Badger books are wiped clean. So no information is stored on them after the election. Does anyone have questions about that? Yep. I don't think St. Stephen's has Wi-Fi that I'm aware of, and do you know about the?
And that is on the voter. They're going to have to find another way.
Hopefully they're able to pull it using their data instead of Wi-Fi. Okay, so on the top of the Badger book screen, when we get back there, this is what it will look like, except it'll have our information. The top left will have this start over new voter button. So if somebody comes in, you start going through the process, they either don't have a photo ID or they just decide they're gonna come back later or not vote at all. You just hit start over new voter. That completely clears out everything you just did and it goes back to the start. Previous screen would be the last screen you were on. In the middle, the top will be the current election that we're running. The middle is the polling place, and the bottom is the wards. So it'll say St. Stephen's, and then the wards below that. On the far right side, it doesn't show it on this picture, but on the top, there will be where you can change the font. So if you need it a little bigger, you'll be able to slide that over and change it. The 3 lines take you to the main navigation page. So this is where you can toggle between checking in absentee voters or just normal voters. It has that the polls are open. They have to be open to complete anything on the Badger books. And it will have the current voter count. So this will generally update after you hit finish voter. So I'm just going to go through a couple examples. When you check in a voter, it's the same process as it always has been. You're going to ask a voter to state his or her name and address. Once they've said their name and address, you're going to select the stated name and address tile. You're going to start by typing in 2 to 3 letters of their last name. So if it's Johnson, start typing J-O. The results will start to appear very quickly. You can add part of a first name too if it is Johnson. That will narrow down the results quite a bit. All right, and then once you find your voter, you will hit on the far left the select voter. And this is after you verified their name and address match what the person just told you. On the far right is the update name and update address buttons. If there is a small typo in their name, this is where we can make note of that. So you would select update name, and it's a misspelling. So if it's supposed to be Johnson, S-E-N instead of O-N, this is where you would make a note for us, and we would change it later in the Badger whiz vote. You'll ask to see the voter's photo ID. This is where you'll select Wisconsin driver's license or any of the other options that are there. All right, so after you selected Wisconsin driver's license, you're going to be reviewing this information. It's going to tell you what to look for on their driver's license. Does the name match what's in the poll book to what's on their ID? Does the photo reasonably match who's in front of you? Is it expired after the last general election? It will give you that date, so you don't have to remember what it is. And you do not review the address. If all those meet the requirements, you would hit acceptable. If you hit not acceptable, it will ask you if they have another form of photo ID, or it will direct you to direct them to the chief for a provisional ballot. You will turn and ask the voter to sign and select done. This is where keep palm up, just use your fingertip. When you're turning the Badger book, make sure not to grab the corners, grab in the middle to rotate. You'll review their signature to make sure it's an X or something like a scribble and not a fish or I don't want to do this, anything. And then accept signature. At this point, you'll hand the voter a ballot. We want to make sure all the ballots that are handed to voters have 2 election inspector initials and the City of Monona stamp with the ward and the polling place on it. You'll select Finish Next Voter. The voter number will print, and you'll be ready to start a new person. And this is redirecting a voter. Yes, we printed them all in black and white, sorry. So it is orange. If it's highlighted in orange, but that is their correct name and address, on the far left-hand side is the redirect button. It will have a pop-up window. It will tell you where they should be and the address. So you'll redirect them to that point. And then you can hit done and next voter. If that is them, but they want to register or re-register in Monona, that's when you would do the update address. So we're just going to go quick through what the screens look like for an election day registration. We'll be able to practice all of these when we get to the Badger books in a while. So same process. Ask the voter to state their name and address. Select the voter stated name and address button. Start typing in the JO for Johnson. Results appear. If it's highlighted in orange, confirm that this previous address is familiar to them. You don't want to update somebody that is not them. If it does, you will hit update address. If you can't find any results, so somebody just turned 18 and they're registering for the first time, this is where you would hit none of these are my voter, continue to election day registration. You'll ask to see the voter's proof of residence if they haven't already given it to you. Next screen will be selecting the type of proof of residence they provide. Only accept what they have in this drop-down menu. If you have questions, grab your chief, or they can give us a call if they're still unsure. So this one is providing a driver's license, and then you would continue to step 2. You'll verify that the voter's name is correct. If it is a new registration, you will have to fill in this information. Enter the voter's date of birth if it's not already there. That's going to be a tougher one about scanning ID, because you're not going to, unless they've come up to you and said, I know I'm not registered, but if they think they might be registered, you're not going to scan their ID. If you're scanning an ID, it's pulling their middle name or whatever they have on their ID, and sometimes that's not how they're registered. So you have to be careful with that too. And it would be on that first page when you're searching for the voter that you would scan the ID. We're only going to have scanners at the registration table. Yes. Yes, you do not have a full number there. It's just the last 4 or 2 of any proof of residence. So utility bill, bank statement, not the whole number. Any other questions? You'll be going through this with them. They should hand you, hopefully, their ID and their proof of residence, and you'll be going through this with them. You'll be filling it out.
So we just do it on the computer, we don't have to fill out the form?
Correct. You don't have to fill out the form just on the computer. Unless they come in with one filled out, then you're going to be typing that information straight from their form. Yes, but everyone is probably going to end up doing registrations. People do walk in, think they're registered. Depending on lines, depending on your line, it might be easier to just go through these screens and do it with them. The books that we have at each of your stations are going to have the address list in it to make sure that they're in the correct place. So you'll need to verify that before you continue with the registration. Get your chief or super user if you have questions as you're going through that. And I'll be definitely floating around on election day too, but I might be at the other polling place. So as you're going through that form, you'll want to try to get their email address or phone number. It's not required, but it is helpful. A lot of people don't respond to Joan's letters, but when I call them, we have better luck getting some of the information that might be missed, or there was a problem, we just sometimes need to contact voters. They're not required to provide it, but it's helpful. You'll ask if the voter had a prior name. If they did, there's a radio button you can select and then type in that name. This will help us later when we're updating WizVote to pull those 2 records together. Then you'll continue to step 3. You'll record the voter's address as it appears on their proof of residence document, and you'll use that for the home address field. You have to start with a minimum of 3 characters before anything will start to pop up. Sometimes an address won't be in there. If that's the case, you'll want to grab your chief to help go through the adding a new address. But we try to make sure every address in Monona is in here. Once the address is selected, it will pull into the fields, so you won't have to retype it. You can just start searching for it, select the correct one, it'll automatically pull it for you. Ask whether they have a prior address, and if they have a mailing address, you would enter those in. If they do, continue to the next step. You're going to verify the voter's eligibility. So these are the questions that were on the form that they're answering. Are you a citizen of the United States? Are you at least 18 years of age? Have you been issued a Wisconsin driver's license? If they have, that number is required. If they have not, they will ask you for the last 4 of their social security number, which they'll be able to put in. Have you resided at your current address for at least 10 days? And are you currently serving a sentence for a felony conviction? Are you otherwise disqualified from voting? So once they've answered all these questions, you'll have to enter the driver's license or social security number. Then you would continue to the next step. If they've answered one of those questions where they're not eligible to vote, a pop-up will come up saying this voter is ineligible to vote. It's possible they just selected the wrong radio button, so you can edit that. But otherwise, if they're a felon, they're unable to vote if they're still currently serving a sentence. Yes. So that's the review page. They're going to want to review their name and address, date of birth to make sure all that's correct, plus the questions that were asked. Once all of it's verified, you continue to the next step. You turn, allow the voter to read the statement and certify that the information is true, and then they'll sign. You'll turn it back to yourself, and then you will sign, just like signing the bottom of the form. If they have an assister, this is where you would document that information as well. And then you would select continue. The voter is now registered. If they would like to vote, you would hit continue to check in voter. If they just wanted to register to vote and then they're leaving, you would hit finish. They do have to register and then vote at the same, or check in to vote at the same machine. It doesn't, their EDR information does not get transferred to the other machines. So they have to be at that machine to do it. Does anyone have questions? We will go through all of these back there. So as we're going through them, you can ask as many questions as well, just to get a feel for it. If it says it's valid without a photo, it's still valid. Any other questions? Yes, in the back. No, we should be filling out a majority of it. The questions are sensitive, so you're not going to want to read those out loud, so you would turn and have them select those buttons. Or if you select it for them, they do have to review it to make sure that you selected the correct answers for them. And the machines just turn, and that's where they'll sign. You turn it back to yourself, and you can sign, turn it for the questions, turn it back. Yes. Yes, they can answer the questions when they're standing. They might have to crouch down a little bit. I'm a pretty short person, and I prefer to stand at them because I can just see the screen so much better. Once you go through 2 voters, you're just going to go right through it every single time. And the majority of what we're going to see is voter check-in, what you guys are going to see. And it's a few steps. You'll get the hang of it in a jiff. Yes. Site problems provisions, if they are unable to sign, there is something that we can select saying they're exempt by the poll workers. You would then quietly read those questions to them if they're unable to see them, or if they have an assister. It does, and we can only be as private as we can and still get all those questions answered. Hopefully they also have an assister that can help, especially if somebody is unable to see. Yeah. Joan was just saying that would be a case we can let them fill in the form, then we can copy it off of the form, because then they'll answer those questions there if they can't hear, but they can see. The top right, you can make everything a little bit bigger. I mean, it's not going to be gigantic. What they're doing is answering those questions. If they can't see them, you can read them the questions, and they can whisper it to you. You can tell them which one to push. You can say yes or no. You can be directing them. It does not get gigantic. So we'll just have to work with it the best we can. We can have forms around if they want to check those instead. Magnifiers, we can make sure we have some of those laying around too. Yes. That's what I do at work too. I have bifocal or reading glasses up next to me. I don't use them, but other people need them sometimes. So it's helpful to have an extra pair laying around. Yes. They can be. But we're going to.
Now, this area,
So as you can see, when we were going through the process of just a check-in voter compared to an election day registration, those are going to take a lot longer. They always have. So we're trying to streamline them to 1 or 2 stations to make the rest of the lines go faster. Because you don't want 5 Badger books full with election day registrations and nobody else is able to check in until those are done. So we're trying to keep them together. You and your chief, again, we have not done this before, so this is going to be a learning experience for everyone. So any feedback you guys have as we're going through this, I'm going to be running around. I want to hear it. I want to know how we can make this better and make it work for everyone. Yes. Yes, they can check in people if nobody's registering to vote. Yep. We bought hand sanitizer to have for people. Excuse me. We also have screen cleaner. The goal would be not to go overboard on cleaning the screens. I was telling Joan, we never washed the pens off between voters, so it's kind of the same thing. If it gets really gunked up, that's when we want you guys to clean the screens. Otherwise, give it enough time in between. Not like every voter, we're not cleaning the screen after every voter. But hand sanitizer, yes, we'll have it for you guys. Any other questions? Yes, Mary. Yep, that's the goal of the greeter as well. Yeah, registered voters stand in this line, wait for the next available Badger book. If you are not registered to vote, over here, please. So the greeter can definitely be helping direct people. That's one of their main goals.
Oh, go ahead. Yep. Yeah. If we need to, we would probably, Aline was saying, we'd probably have one line. If we had a lot of people, we might have one line. We might have, and people would go as a station was available. No, yeah, the alphabetizing is gone, so that voters can go to any station, which is going to, again, streamline our process. And not having to cross all the lines to get a ballot is also going to streamline our process. We're, again, this is new, and I've had there was a suggestion from another clerk to maybe put, line forms here and have, so that you don't have 10 people crammed together. You might have, so that everybody can see where the openings are. Because if we're all in a line, we're not going to see that, oh, I could be at that one, So we can try to, keep it moving, just like we do. And if you think about some of the questions that come up, again, as Aline said, the pens, we didn't wash the pens. The voters who are impaired in some way that affects the way that they're able to fill out a registration form, that's the way it was already. So we will help as much as we are able, as we always have. We would fill out a registration form for a voter who wasn't able to do it themselves. You'd sign as the assister, and that's what you do on the Badger book. There really is not an incredible amount of process difference. There's only how we actually make it happen difference. So, and we're hoping it's better. Okay, I'm sorry? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
The-
definitely know better after April and
Yeah.
February what we're going to need to do for the general.
Yep, the suggestion was to have voters start filling out paper forms as they stood in line to register. We'll see how that goes, just to get the information out so that they don't have to repeat it verbally. But, again, we're going to learn as we go. I'm excited about the absentee check-in process because I heard from another clerk that they had them all checked in by noon, and they had 2,500 of them. That's how quick it'll go. So again, when we go step by step, I just want to say step-by-step instructions is tedious and seems difficult, but once you see those screens and you see what it's telling you to do, you're going to find you're going to like it. I think you're going to like it a lot because there's no guessing on your part. That date is there for the expiration date. Did they really give you what they said they gave you? Do we have the right form? It's all right there. So let's hang in with that. Like to move on, and then I wanted to touch on some other less common election day processes. And if you look at page 30, I'm looking at curbside voting. And there is this description. I don't want to go through the entire thing because I want us to have plenty of time on the Badger books. But if somebody is unable to come into the polling place, a ballot is taken out to them by 2 election inspectors. They know you need to kind of announce that that's what you're doing. We're taking a ballot to a voter. Again, on Badger books, there's a button for curbside voter, and so it'll walk you through what you need to do in a way of how to record it into Badger books. It'll tell you how to do that. So it's just something to please review prior to Election Day so you have this in your mind. And we'll have, again, instructions at each polling station so that you're kind of can refer to any of these oddities, kind of more odd things. On page 31, it talks about assisting electors. And it does, this one is anyone, it can be anyone the voter chooses unless it's, except for their employer or their union representative. But they can have you, they can have their kid, they can have all kinds of anybody that they choose, help them vote. The assistant does not have to be a qualified elector. In other words, as I said, they don't have to be 18, they don't have to be registered to vote, they don't have to live in Monona, they don't have they can be anybody that the voter chooses. So a voter may come in with their hired assistant or their person that helps them in their day-to-day activities. That person can be their assistant to vote. You record the name and address of the assistant in the Badger book space provided. And I don't see that they're asking for the address of the assistant, so we'll see. They do? Okay, they do. Thank you. Yes, they do. And if the Badger book has a space for exempt, if the assisted voter is unable to sign. So you don't have to remember that really long thing you're supposed to write in the poll book, exempt by the will of the inspectors or something, whatever it was. It was a crazy long thing to say. And then the assistant will sign the ballot in the space provided. There is a space at the bottom of the ballot. Under where you initial it, kind of down toward the bottom, there's a place for the assister to sign a ballot. And that proves that ballot was assisted by that individual. And then you need to tell a chief if you have an assistant, because this does need to be recorded in the incident log. You have any questions about curbside voting or assisting electors? Awesome, okay. Going through the absentee ballot process, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. Aline described it's going to be a lot easier in Badger books, but here's a few reminders. If election inspectors know that a voter is deceased, the absentee ballot must be rejected. There was an effort to change that law, and it kind of just stopped in the process of being considered by legislatures. So we do need to reject an absentee ballot of someone that we know is deceased. I would prefer before we do that, that you call City Hall so we can look up online and see is that person really deceased before we reject a ballot for that reason. The numbers will not be printed on the Badger book for an absentee ballot, but they will be recorded. Voter is assigned a voter number just like everybody else, and it'll be in the Badger book, but it won't be printing out because that's kind of a waste. So that's nice. Any absentees that have to be rejected at the polls will be banded together and labeled. An example would be if the envelope is tampered with in any way and we have to reject it because we're not sure that that ballot wasn't affected by somebody other than the voter. The witness signature the witness address and signature are required. We check these envelopes as best we can at City Hall, and we follow up with the voter as much as we can. We call, and usually we do get response, but if we need to have additional response, we'll let you know, because we can't reject that ballot until 8 o'clock, until the polls close, so that the voter has a chance to come in and fix it. And then they're not fixing the ballot, I should be clear on that. They're fixing the certificate envelope. Once they've voted absentee, they're not getting another ballot. They can't change that. So if the envelope is missing something, and the voter could not correct it before the end of election day, the voter can, and they couldn't come to the polls and correct it, they cannot vote a new ballot. So we will have those kind of banded together in case we have some that were kind of, I would consider them kind of pending, I guess. The original witness has to be present if they come to the polling place or City Hall to fix the absentee certificate. The voter needs to sign, the witness needs to sign and provide their address. The voter would re-sign the ballot envelope. We'd have them sign it again. This would be documented on the incident log. The voter can't take that certificate envelope out of the polling area at all. The voting area, remains with the inspectors, that certificate. The ballot has, as I said, has to be rejected if the voter doesn't come in before the polls close. And if the original witness does not come in with the voter, the law says the voter can't vote. So we do everything we can knowing that. We want people to vote. That is our goal and our job, and we do everything we can to get that ballot corrected. I mean, I mail them back to people if there's enough time. I call them. We do everything we possibly can to try to get that fixed so that their ballot can count. You have a question? I can be, the clerk and City Hall staff can be witnesses at City Hall only, not on election day. Election day is, everything happens at the polling place. So they couldn't come to City Hall because they wouldn't have the ballot anymore. It's, the envelope and everything is at the polling place. So, we witness in absentee walk-ins all the time, but we need to, on election day, deal with any that we couldn't possibly get a hold of. But again, we do everything we can because it's kind of one of the few sort of fatal things, It's very, very important that you count the number of absentee envelopes. Once those are open and emptied, we got to know that they're all opened and emptied and that you have the same number that it shows. It gets recorded on the certification page, for one thing, that number of absentees, but it also has to match, that count has to match what Badger Book says are the absentees. So we need to make sure those envelopes are all empty. And I'm emphasizing that because it happened at the recount that it was found that some envelopes were not opened and not empty. We need to make sure that that happens. And in addition, you may have heard of, I won't go into it too deeply because it did happen though that in McFarland very recently, one absentee was found after the polls closed and the race was a tie. It was, and I want to tell you the media went whack on that. And who did they look at? The clerk. So please don't put me in that position. I love you guys, but come on. And make sure, it is vitally important that those absentee ballots are dealt with completely. So does anyone have any questions? Any final questions? Yes? Yeah. Oh. We're probably, and that is not a bad question at all. How it's going to work is we'll probably have one of the Badger Book stations working primarily on those in between voters. And what we'll have is 2 people that the chief inspectors assign, at the bigger election anyway, to be running back and forth with the ballots, the certificate envelopes. And then they will be the ones that open them and put them through the machine once you've checked them in. Normally, I think how we do it, I mean, we think in February we'd probably do that, it'd be at one place. And, there won't be as many in February, but we want to get those processed as fast as we can so we're not working on them all day long or till late into the night, which can happen. So we'll have extra people definitely in November and probably April if I have enough workers. I have enough people to be working on those and checking in. Voters can check in at the Badger Books in between doing like 10 check-in, because it's really ding, 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 it's easy, and stating the name and address is the longest part of the process. So, but thank you. Yes? There's going to be, at each polling place, there's 1 server and 4 clients. We started out with less. The recommendation was 1 machine for every 1,000 voters. So we started with 4, and then we thought we need another one because we're right up against that limit. So we wanted to have ample machines. If we find in November in particular that it would have been nice to have another machine, or if we find that out even in April, maybe by November we'll see if we can get approval to get another one if we need it. But we also have the space constraints, and we also already know that registrations take forever on election day. What I'm trying to do, the best that I can, is get the word out to please register now. Register well before, because if you wait until election day, that's where the bog down happens. And this is what happened in Sun Prairie. They allowed people to register to vote at all of the stations. And they got in such a backlog of people that there were people who never did get to vote. And that's not what we want to have happen. Again, who did they look at? And so our job, that's why we're having registrations at one spot. Maybe we'll have it at 2 in November if the other lines go fast. And deal with it separately. And voters are just going to have to know, if you wait until the last minute, you're going to have to wait a little bit. It's going to take longer. So our job is to just try to get them done as fast as we can, but we can only do what we can do. So that's why we decided we're doing a whole separate, we're keeping that separate so that the bog down's only at one station, not at all of them. But if you can do one, go ahead and do one. Yes? Yes. The server is used for everything. The server is a totally capable machine for every process. So that is not a shutdown station or anything, not used for anything else. It's totally everything. We maybe would have that be the registration one. I don't know. You know, it really doesn't matter as long as it doesn't get unplugged. Don't do it. Okay. Final thoughts then, if nobody has any other questions, then we'll let you oh, yes. Yes, ma'am. If I had to guess, the question was, is the Badger Book a precursor to electronic voting? And I will, without a paper ballot trail, I doubt that will ever happen in Wisconsin, because Wisconsin is very proud of their voter record. We all should be, and in particular Monona, just a shout out to Monona voters. But we have a paper trail. We have a paper ballot trail. If there's ever a question of how somebody, of the outcome not matching what people actually voted, we have the backup to prove that they did. I cannot imagine a time that there would not be a paper trail in Wisconsin. And so Badger Books is only an effort to modernize the process of voting to more what people are used to nowadays, which is everything's electronic. But voting remains the same. Voting is you and your paper ballot in a private space voting. And then it's counted by an electronic machine, but the electronic machine just counts it. It doesn't affect that ballot. Once you have voted it, it's complete. So I don't see that ever happening. I think there'd be a whole lot of pushback. So other states do all ballots by mail. I don't know if that would ever happen in Wisconsin either, but it seems to be going that way with the popularity of absentee voting. But that, I've not heard a thing about that either. So I wouldn't worry at all, because Wisconsin has got a good system, and they really want to maintain that good system. And I feel like Badger Books is really a modernization enhancement. It's going to help. It's going to help. I just want to remind you all that it's much more important to be accurate than it is to be fast. I say that all the time. We don't want to waste anybody's time, and we don't want to make it seem like we're lagging, but we also need to be accurate. So please don't feel stressed. If you need help, get it. And just look at it and follow the steps and take your time, because we want it to be right. You know, we want it correct. And so I think now it's time to try Badger Books. Again, I want to thank you all for coming today in this weather and anyway. And I want to thank you all for your commitment to helping Monona vote, because Monona votes. Thank you very much.